Palasha Dhumra Sankashan Tarakagraha Mastakan Raudran Rudratmakan Ghoran Tanketun Pranamamyaha. Namaste. Welcome to the Atharva Forum. Today we'll talk about Ketu Mala or Ketu Chara, which is one of the 64 Angas of Vedanga Jyotisham. Please subscribe to the Atharva Forum. Now, Ketu, what does the word mean? The word Ketu itself directly means a comet or a banner. For example, a pataka, a flag, things like that. So the Ketu shape used to be somewhat like elongated triangle in ancient India. That was the type of flags used by kings. It essentially means a flag or a comet. Comet usage is very, very common. One of the 64 Vedangas is Ketu Chara. It is also called as Ketu Mala, Ketu Charitam, Ketu Shastram by various names. What are the sources for this particular Vedanga? Similar to others, we can see that Adbhuta Sagara, which is a late redaction, then going back in time, Brihat Samhita, then going further back, Parāśara's text, vṛddhagārga Samhita. These are all the texts where we typically encounter records of Ketu-s. But did it start from there? It started right from the Rigveda, because Rigveda is the oldest document we have today. There are references to Ketu, Dhoomketu, then different kinds of Dhoomketu-s also, and Atharva Veda. For example, a reference from Atharva Veda is like this. Atha yatraitat Dhoomketuhu saptarshin upadhupayati tad ayogakshema shankam ityuktam iti Kaushika Sutram. So there is a part called Kaushika Sutram in Atharva Veda where they talk about a particular Dhoomketu trying to create a hazy effect near Saptarishi Mandalam in the north. And some phalam is given for that, and it says it portends ill. So we find right from the Rigveda Samhita itself through Atharva Veda and other related Vedic texts, there are references to Ketu or Dhoomketu. And of course, later texts like I mentioned just before, Parashara Tantraṃ, vṛddhagārga Jyotisham, etc. also have a lot of information. Then the Jain tradition also, for example, during Mahavira's death, a comet called Kshudratma, which looked like a heap of ash, was supposedly seen when he passed away. And much further down the line in historical times, Rajatarangini, and there are sources. Inscriptions are also sources for Dhoomketu, when it occurred, how it appeared, etc. In this brief introduction, though, we will take up a particular text, which is Parāśaratantraṃ, Parāśara's recording of how Ketu-s looked like, or what observations he or his ancestors as well as Shishyas did. This is how he starts. Let us just get into it so that we get a flavor of what kinds of observations were done, why they were done, why were they preoccupied with this. Because it is easy to generalize this or generally talk about it without referencing particular texts. But if we look at the real texts, we come to understand what they were thinking about this. So for example, this is what Parāśara says. Shatam ekottaram ketunam bhavati tesham shodasha mrityu nishvasa jaha dvadasha aditya sambhavaha, etc. We can look at it in depth. What he is saying is there are 101 comets. Shatam ekottaram ketunam. Ketunam shatam ekottaram is 101. So there are 101 Ketu-s, comets. But this 101 is divided into 11 categories, 11 groups. Now, what are these 11? It is like this. 16 among the 101 are born out of Mrityu Nishvasa Jaha. So, Mrityu's breath. 16 of them are born out of the exhalation of Mrityu. 12 are from Aditya. 11 are due to Rudrasya Krodhaha, or Rudra's anger. So this is the kind of division he does. So let us look at this passage. Shatam ekottaram ketunam bhavati tesham shodasha 16 mrityu nishvasa jaha dvadasha aditya sambhavaha ekadasha daksha yajna vilayane rudra krodha jaha shat paitamaha. So there are 6 belonging to Pitamaha. Panchadasha kruddho. So there was a Uddalaka who had 15 sons. They are all Ketus. Pancha Prajapater Hasajaha. Saptadasha Marichi Kashyapa Lalatajaha, Trayo Vibhavasujaha, Chaturdasha Mathyamane Samudre Somena Saha Sambhutaha, Dhumodbhavaha Ekaha, Ekastu Brahmakopajaha iti. So it's a classification which may sound a little peculiar to us, but most likely they might have been related to Pauranika Kathaha, and maybe through their appearance, different groups were formed. But it is not really very clear why these were formed, but it is like this: 15 are children of angry Uddalaka, 5 are from the laughter of Prajapati, 17 are from the forehead of Marichi and Kashyapa. Marichi Kashyapa should be only one person. 3 are from Vibhavasu. And this is also interesting. When the Ksheerasagara Manthanam happened, 14 of these Ketus came along with the Chandra outside the Ksheerasagara, out of it when they were trying to churn it. So these kinds of records are found in first. But they are also very clear that out of the 101, 26 have been very well observed and passed down the parampara. For example, this is what he says: Ebhyaha Shadvimshatir Udayaihi Phalam Avedayanti. Shadvimshati is 26. From 26 observations or observation of 26 comets, Phalam Avedayanti. Different kinds of phalam, which is forecasting of what might happen if you see this particular Ketu, that has been recorded. But how do they record it? Tan namato rupataha tat kalato vidhasyamaha. There are 4 parameters for each Ketu that are being recorded, or at least for most of them. Namataha. First is, we will tell the name of the Ketu. We will describe the form. Phalataha. What will happen if this Ketu is sighted? It need not always be bad, because nowadays Ketu is always associated with bad phalam. That is not the case. There are a few Ketus here which give subhiksham, not just durbhiksham. And tat kalataha. So this kala is time. What is the time? Time is, there is one Ketu seen, after which maybe 108 years have passed, another Ketu is seen. So the gap between 2 Ketus is also recorded. And also, if it is seen for several months, then for how long it is seen, that is first. Maybe some days, for some months, that is possible. And then for how long it gives results in the earth, on earth, to people living on earth. So these aspects of the time related to the Ketu are discussed. So in this brief introduction, what we should do is, we'll look at some of the Ketus and the way they are described, just to give an idea. To know more about it, there are sources that are given in the description box. Please refer to them. Tatra martyavaha traya udayanti. Ekaikasho vasaketuhu asthiketuhu shastraketurva. So names, we have to observe that Ketu is the generic word and specific Ketus are given specific names. So for example, today we say Halley's Comet or Hyakutake. So many different kinds of names, or just numbers are also being given to different comets. So they had very nice descriptive names based on the appearance, most likely. For example, Asthiketuhu is one name. Asthi simply means bones in Sanskritam. So it looks either like shape of the bone or the color of it is like a bone. Either the shape or color, one of these factors will resemble that object. So they will use that object to name the Ketu. That is usually how it is. Vasaketuhu is one. Asthiketuhu is one. Shastraketuhu is one. So how does he describe? Tatra Vasaketuhu snigdho mahan udagayata shikhaha. So shikha means its tail. So the tail part is known as shikha. Shikha is of course the shikha of Brahmanas and Trivarga. But with respect to Ketu, shikha means its tail part. Trimshad varshashatam proshya samplaveshu paschime noditaha sadyo marakaphalaha. Ruksho asthiketuhu asaubhikshakaraha tulya pravasakala phalaha purvena snigdha eva shastraketuhu shastravritta raja virodha. So in this case, they say Vasaketuhu, Asthiketuhu, Shastraketuhu. They rise after one another. But there is a time here. What is it? Vasaketu rises after 130 years from saṃplava. Very interesting. So saṃplava is supposed to be that big flood that happened all over the world. It is associated with Matsya Avatara in the Puranas, and when it happened is a big question. So we won't get into it, but it looks like they started counting from the saṃplava, because obviously everything is gone, washed out, and people remaining are like very thin in the sense of the numbers, and they might remember something from the past, they might not. So it almost was a reset button kind of. So after the saṃplava, 130 years pass before Vasaketu shows up. So that is what he says. And then there are other Asthiketu, Shastraketu, they also come. Then they describe the Shikha, with its crown bent towards north, having risen in the west. So where does it rise? How does the head look? How does the tail look? Does it have a specific color? Size also. In some of the later descriptions, we can find that it is of the size of Arundhati or one of the taras of Krittika Nakshatram, etc. So they have observed it that minutely. And then the Phalam causes immediate destruction. Then Asthiketu has the same period, and then it also causes famine. These kinds of observations are recorded. So then there is also an invisibility period. So it is said from saṃplava, 130 years later, this Ketu is sighted. What does this 130 mean? This is for this 130 years, he has gone on a pravasa. It is an invisibility period. It was somewhere, then it appears in our skies. So that is how they have recorded it. Then after these three come and go, they have recorded one more Ketu called Kumudaketu. Tatra Kumudaketu Vasadi Ketuchara Samaptau Varunyam Darshanam Upeti. Varuni Dik is west. So when all these have gone, then this Kumudaketu is seen in the west. And then what does it look like? What is the phalam? The very nice descriptions. Gokshira Vimala Snigdha Prabham Purvena Abhinatam Shikham Kritva. So Gokshira, cow's milk. So how white is cow's milk? So similarly, it is like a very bright white color Ketu, Kumuda Ketu. In fact, Kumuda is a Kumuda Pushpa, which is also white. So we can see why they have named it as Kumudaketu, because of its color only. Then it says it is seen for one night and with the head bent eastwards. So the direction in which it is facing, the opposite direction will be for the tail, obviously. So that is recorded. And this is a positive Ketu. This causes good food production and friendly relation among people for a period of 10 years. So for how long it gives a positive phalam, that is also indicated. But there could be exceptions to this. So here he says, in the western region, it causes various diseases to people. So there could be various regional differences as to what is the phalam that it gives people. So this is recorded. Kumudaketu. Adityajanam Kapalaketu Rudayate. So there is one more recording here. Adityajaha, but its name is Kapalaketu. It also rises in the east. Then it is seen on a new moon evening. So Amavasyayam Purvasyam Dishi Sadhumarchis Shikho. Again Shikha is being recorded. Nabho Vishayardhe Charan Drishyate. So it is moving almost at the center of the sky. One more record point that is recorded is seen 125 years and 3 fortnights after Kumudaketu. This is a very sukshma observation, whether they were very strictly keeping record in this very remote time. If you can say roughly 100 years or 120 years later, that is perfect. This is 125 years and 3 pakshas later after Kumudaketu, this Kapalaketu appears. So maybe they had a very fine way of recording the date. See, for example, the long count, which is the Shaka or Vikrama era, is seen only for the last 2000 years, 100 years, within that span only. Before that, we don't find it in Chanakya's Arthashastram and other texts. In Puranas also, we don't have a long count. Maybe there is a count of a Raja, his reign, etc. So here, there is a possibility of a long count from saṃplava. So the flood happened and they started counting from that. So this is a possibility. And in fact, we can see there are 26 Ketus that are recorded. If we total up the years that they say, so for example, this is 130 years after saṃplava, after this some years passed, and then after this 125 years and 3 fortnights later, Kapalaketu appears. If we total up all this, it comes to around 1000 or 1300 years based on some error band. So probably they had a very vibrant recording and a parampara for more than 1000 years, it looks like. And the end of it is the time of Parāśara, who has recorded this for us in prose. It is not in the form of verses. That is also something interesting. The 26 comets are also talked by vṛddhagārga in its, for example, in the same form, not just in the prose, but in verse form, but the information is somewhat very similar. He gives slightly different aspects of these Ketus, but more or less they are very similar. Moving on to the next Ketu, Maniketu. This is one more Ketu after Kapalaketu. Maniketu rapi Kapalaketos chara avasane, after the end of Kapalaketus in our skies, pratichyam udayan upatapaya west and causes problem. Here is what I said before. There is a very nice observation. Prasukshmo arundhati taraka matraha. Matra is size. What is the size? Because not all comets will be seen in a similar size. Some of them will be big, some of them will be very, very, very small. Today's naked eye observation is very difficult because of light pollution, but they had no such problems. So here he says, the Saptarishi Mandala has Vasishtha, and near that there is an Arundhati. Arundhati Darshanam anyway is well known in Vivaha Samskara. This Arundhati is a very, very small Tara. So comparable to Arundhati Tara's size is this Maniketu, which is very interesting. And it is also milky white but oily in observation. They are just observing and they are saying it is milky white but a little bit oily, appears oily. And stationary crown bent towards the east. So starting from its rise, for a period of 4.5 months, it produces good health and abundant food for people. So this is also a positive Ketu. If seen for a longer period, it increases generation of inferior life forms. So it also has its expiry date. So if it is seen much more longer than its period, say 4.5 months, then it starts causing trouble. So Udayat Prabhriti Ardha Panchaman Masan. Ardha Panchama means 4.5. So you subtract Ardha from Pancha. It's a very different way of representing numbers, but nonetheless it is seen in ancient texts, including Aksharatantraṃ of Samaveda, etc. So Ardha Panchaman Masan Kshema Subhiksham Utpadayati. Positive. Kshudra Jantu Pradurbhavam Karoti Atimatra Kala Drishtaha. So if it exceeds that time, still it is being observed, then it produces negative effects. So that is what he says about Maniketu. This is there in vṛddhagārga also. Then he goes on to other Ketus. Atha Daksha Yagnye Rudra Krodhotbhavaha Kaliketu Trini Varsha Shatani Navamasan Proshya. It's a very long span, at least with respect to human lifespans. So after this Ketu that was seen before, 300 years pass. 300 years and 9 months pass. Then Kaliketu comes. Why is it named as Kaliketu? Because of its adverse effects, probably, but it shouldn't be related to the start of Kali Yuga, etc., as some people have tried to do. So that kind of chronology is not very clear. We can just give a relative chronology from the saṃplava. The saṃplava itself is not fixed, so we are not very sure about the dates of this. But Parāśara's internal date is 3500 or 3300 years before present. So maybe 1000 years before that, they started observing and he has summarized it for us. That could be a kind of dating that is internal to Parāśara Tantra. Maybe that is the possible date of this text and the observation of 1000 years. So Kaliketu appears 300 years and 9 months after the previous one passes up. From the east, then it goes into Vishwanathan. So this Vishwanathan is like the sky itself is divided into 3 margas, and each marga is divided into 3 vithis. There are 9 regions of the sky where there could be 2 or 3 nakshatras on an average. So that's a region, broader region. It is not just one nakshatra, maybe 2 or 3. So they also describe the path where it goes or the location in the sky. So from the east in the Vishwanara path with a harsh copper red color head with the tip of a trident. So almost like it looks like a trishula. It travels 1/3 of the sky to be seen at the horizon. So sky itself will be 180 degrees. So almost for 60 degrees of the sky it is seen, which is actually quite long for a Ketu. And the time period for which it gives some effect for us is for years equal to the number of months seen. If it is seen for 3 months, then whatever phalam they are going to say will last for 3 years. If it is seen for 6 months, then for 6 years you have to suffer. The comet, having reduced the population to 1/3, leaves the autumn grain yield to be worth 8 measures, which is less. So it reduces population maybe through diseases, etc., and also reduces grain yields. Most likely they have observed it. They have literally observed a Ketu and they have seen that this is what it does. So that is probably what they have. Paitamaha Jalaketu. Next is, there is a Jalaketu and it is called Paitama. This is 115 years after Kaliketu in the west. Then again, the crown, Shikha, which is the tail, and where it is, etc., are all described. But this particular case is very important because they really track the way it moves. For example, this is what it says. Bent southward. The crown is bent southward, following 1/3 of the sky as it travels north. So it travels north, exhibiting a head like the tip of again like somewhat like a Trishula. It moves close to Brahma Nakshatram. Most likely this is Abhijit. Today we might be calling it as Vega in modern astronomical terms. So that is anyway in the northern celestial pole region. Then touches Dhruva, which is actually the pole star. Brahma Rashi is again a region which is close to Dhruvatara. Saptarishi Mandalam again close to Dhruvatara, and returns half the sky to set in the south. So it is like this. It rises in the west, then goes to the north, and then goes to the south. So they have recorded, they have observed probably for several months and how it moves. They have a kind of a notation to indicate different regions of the sky. It could be through the Margas, Vithi, etc., which is 9-fold regional classification of the sky. Or it could just mean like this: Saptarishi Mandalam, Shishumara Mandalam, Dhruvatara, etc. So this is a wonderful observational culture that was there around 3,500 or even 4,000 years ago, which we must imbibe. Unfortunately, it declined later on. Then the phalam of this is also said. It does horrible deeds in the sky, shakes the universe and the earth for a period of 10 months, destroys populous provinces like Madhya Desha, the central part of Bharatam. Then it troubles other places also for 18 months by occasional fear of enemies, drought, disease, death. So this is a very bad Ketu. So they are describing the phalam also in a very potent way, because it is almost like forewarning people essentially. So what do you do when you see something like this? Then the next one is Jalaketu. Most likely it looked bluish in hue. That is why it is. So Atha Jalaketu Paitamahasya Jalaketor Navamasa karmani kritam pravartayati. So the effects of the previous Ketu have to end, but assume that you have calculated that it is ending on this month. Almost 9 months before that only this Jalaketu is seen in the sky. So it looks like they have predicted that till the end of this year, the phalam of the previous Ketu is there. And now they are already looking at the phalam, and then some Ketu suddenly appears 9 months before this period has already ended. So we can imagine how people were sitting around, oh, we are yet to finish suffering from the previous Ketu. Now this Jalaketu, some other new Ketu has come up in the horizon. So that is exactly how they have recorded. Paitamahasya Jalaketor Navamasa Avashishte. So 9 months are left for the effects to wear off from the previous Ketu. Already this Jalaketu has come up. Again, it rises in the west, head is bent to the west, and with a well-formed star, it gives within 9 months health and plenty of food. So hopefully this was a hopeful Ketu, because it didn't cause more trouble. It was kind of soothing for them because it gives positive results. In fact, it says so much, it compensates for the bad effects of other celestial objects. Anya grahakritanam cha ashubhanam vyaghataya. So it kind of, not just the other Ketus, but there could be Navagrahas which are troubling people according to that worldview. So it kind of soothes people with its own positive effects. This is Jalaketu. Then there are other Ketus like Urmi, Shita, etc. Their intervals, etc. are also given. After the work of some of these other Ketus, there is one Bhavaketu that is seen in the east. Here is again you get a indication of the size of the Ketu. It is of the size of the North Star of Kritika. So Kritika is a group of 6 taras. And one of the taras, which is the northernmost, they would have probably been able to identify which one is the northmost. Now also we could identify. And that size is very similar to the comet size. So, ya Kritikanam Uttaratara tat pramanaya snigdhaya prabhaya simhalangula samsthanaya pradakshina natagraya shikhaya uditaha. So he rises with this kind of a description. So it's like a tail of a lion, they say. So some of them look like a patch, some of them look like a little bit of hair, some of them look very thick, some of them taper very quickly. So all these with natural descriptions are being recorded here. It produces plenty of food for months equal to the muhurtas it is seen. So it is not seen for very long. If it is seen for say 1 day, then 30 muhurtas. So it says for 30 months it gives subhiksham. But if it looks harsh, it doesn't look harsh, but if it looks harsh, then it can cause diseases which are very terrible and maybe not easy to cure. That is also recorded. Then there is a Shwetaketu and another Ketu called Kaha. The name itself is Kaha only. So Shwetaketu is a very familiar name for people who are aware of Upanishads. In fact, it is recorded Atha Uddaliki Shwetaketu Dashottaram Varshashatam Proshya Bhavaketoho Charante. So this Bhavaketu moves out, then this Shwetaketu comes in. And he is usually seen with another Ketu called Kaha. This Kaha is seen in the form of a Brahmadanda. So Brahmadanda most likely means like a column of light, probably. It's a little difficult to say, but along with it, it is seen. Shwetaketu is seen. Shweta means white, so mostly it was white in color. In the west, there is a Kaha or a Ka Visarga, Kaha, that is also Prajapati Sutaha, son of Prajapati, is also seen like a stambha. And the phalam, etc. is recorded. Then Padmaketu, Swadhiketu. I'm not going into the details of these. Some of the names I am reading out. So Swadhiketu is seen 115 years after Padmaketu. Then Avartaketu. Avartaketu's path is also described. Samvartakaha, Dhoomketu, all these other. So totally 26 can be counted from the saṃplava. This text that I kind of went through very briefly is Parāśaratantraṃ. vṛddhagārga also records similar information but in the form of verses. One thing to note in vṛddhagārga is there is a very interesting verse in vṛddhagārga Samhita in Ketumala. It is this. Bhavishyanti yada sarve yadiva dharma buddhaya Ketu darshana durgani karishyanti cha sarvashaha. Ketu darshana durgani. So you have to erect towers, observation towers or observatories to observe the Ketus, he says. Ketu darshana durgani. Durgam is generally called as a fort, but in this case it could have been a word which describes a fort or a high-rise observatory. So he says, in the future, so we have recorded for our purposes, but in the future, whoever comes, Pandita Dharma Buddhayaha, they have to do this. Ketu Darshana Durgani Karishyanti cha Sarvashaha. So they will install, or you can say they will construct towers for observing Ketus. Obviously, you can observe other objects also. So it doesn't seem to be a very trivial topic for them. In fact, they are so concerned with the Ketu and how it looks, how long it was seen, and after the previous Ketu, what was the gap to the next Ketu. All of that in so minute details have been recorded because it was unpredictable is one, but they also saw adverse effects. There could be some scientific relation with seeing a Ketu and having some adverse effect also, because for example, there could be some meteorite showers and they could cause some other physical changes on Earth. That is also a possibility. So along with the Grahachara, Ketuchara. Ketu is one of the Navagrahas, obviously. It was a very important phenomenon for them in Vedanga Jyotisham. Unfortunately, we see that in Brihat Samhita, he doesn't really care too much about the scientific part of it. He removes all the numbers, none of the numbers, 115 years or 300 years and 9 months or 108 years, whatever the numbers they have recorded and in a particular order, all the numbers are out of the text. Brihad Samhita, he simply records some names, that to jumbled order, and he simply says it is not amenable to Ganitam, so it is simply only for Phalam. And this caused a very weak observational tradition later on. So we don't find very effective observed comets in India in the Samhita later on. The same redactions are there and it is all corrupt. So we have to go back to this and take up this spirit for observation. In conclusion, these are some of the points to keep in mind. There was a very vibrant observation parampara 4,000 years ago or even before that in India, in Bharata. And this is very clearly seen in the records of Ketu. It is of course seen in other Grahachara also, but Ketu is something which is unpredictable. This at least you can observe for 2 decades and try to come up with some model. But Ketu, you have to have a very long kind of observation. Not just long, it is very random. So you have to have a Shishya Parampara. So we knew for 1,000 years there was a Shishya Parampara for both Parāśara as well as Garga. Then there seems to have been a saṃplava long count. So there was a complete flood, it was wiped out, probably whatever they had was all lost. And then probably after that they started counting. So that seems to be there. And vṛddhagārga says as much, Ketu Darshana Durgani Karishyanti. So probably there were observational towers or observatories to observe Ketu and others also. And several of these aspects are explored in other portions of vṛddhagārga Jyotisham, Gargya Jyotisham, like Mahasalilam also. So what we tend to observe from this is that the vibrant parampara of Vedanga Jyotisham kind of gets reduced to more of mathematical calculations in the Siddhantic period, less observation. Even though observation is always emphasized by great scientists and mathematicians like Nilakanta Somayaji, etc., then later on it came down. In fact, there is a possibility that Sindhu Saraswati seals and some of these painted graveware designs that we see from Hastinapuram and other areas, they are symbols that represent some of the Ketu sightings, some of these Ketus. So these aspects are also discussed in the Parāśaratantraṃ text that has been published more than 10 years ago, and a recent paper on Ketu Chara or Ketu Mala in vṛddhagārga Jyotisham also. So with this, I conclude this brief introduction to the Ketu observation in ancient India. It has been a pravada. People say, oh, Indians were very poor with observation. They didn't record Ketus. See other civilizations that have recorded. So it is not a defensive way, but I'm saying we should at least know what has gone before. It is very, very important to the history of science, history of astronomy, history of Indian science. And unfortunately, the parampara didn't continue, so we are kind of opaque to it, or it's very difficult to see what has happened before. But since we do have some of these older texts, it is very clear that they had a very nice scientific parampara here, and we should also absorb some of this spirit in doing science right now. With that, I conclude the session. If you have not subscribed to the Atharva Forum, please do subscribe. Thank you.